Okay, so we're about to dive into something that's, well, it's really heavy, but it's also incredibly important to understand. We're talking about the mass atrocities of the 20th century. And our goal isn't just to list off horrible events. We want to go a little deeper to try and figure out the forces that allowed the unthinkable to happen. So let's get into it.
Just look at this number. It's hard to even wrap your head around, right? That's the estimated number of people killed in just the two world wars. 120 million. That number alone really sets the stage for a century where the scale of violence just exploded to a level nobody had ever seen before. So what changed? Well, this slide really gets to the heart of it. There was this fundamental and frankly terrifying shift in how wars were fought. You see, in the 20th century, civilians weren't just caught in the crossfire anymore. They became the target. Entire populations were deliberately singled out for destruction, and as you can see, the percentage of civilian deaths just went through the roof. So the big question is, how? How did this happen? And the answer, it's not simple. It wasn't just one thing. It was more like a perfect storm, a terrifying combination of different factors that created the conditions for this kind of mass violence. Think of it like a terrible recipe with three deadly ingredients. First, you need the right context, which was total global war. That just normalized the idea of mass death. Second, you need the tools, powerful new technologies that made killing easier and more efficient than ever. And the third, and maybe most crucial ingredient, is the justification. These extremist ideologies that convinced people it was okay to wipe out entire groups of other human beings.
And this is how those ideologies work right here. It's all about creating a powerful us versus them narrative. The in-group is painted as superior, the foundation of the nation, the good guys. Meanwhile, the other gets labeled as a threat, an obstacle, sometimes not even human. They're stripped of their humanity, which makes their elimination seem not just possible, but somehow necessary.
All right, so now that we have this framework, the context, the tools, and the justification, let's see how it plays out in the real world. We're going to look at 5 specific examples where you can see these ingredients coming together with absolutely catastrophic results. And we have to start with the Holocaust. It's probably the most infamous, and for good reason, example of industrialized genocide in all of human history. So what was the justification? It was Hitler's poisonous ideology of a purified German race. And the tool? The full power of the modern industrial state. This wasn't just random killing. The Nazi regime's final solution was a systematic state-run campaign to literally exterminate millions of people in factory-like death camps. And the cost, the numbers are just staggering. Over 11 million people murdered. That includes 6 million Jews and 5 million others, Roma people, homosexuals, people with disabilities, and anyone who dared to oppose the regime. Okay, let's go back a bit in time to World War I. Right in the middle of that conflict, another atrocity was unfolding inside the Ottoman Empire. The ruling party, the Young Turks, were driven by this vision of a modern, purely Turkish state, and they saw the Armenian Christian population as a threat to that vision. With the chaos of the war as their cover, they began a campaign of systematic slaughter and forced relocations, which were really just death marches into the desert. The exact numbers are debated, but we're talking about a massive loss of life. It's believed that somewhere between 600,000 and maybe over 1 million Armenians died from massacres, starvation, and disease. Okay, for our next case, we're shifting gears a little. This wasn't about ethnic purity. This was about a radical, political, almost utopian vision gone horribly wrong. So you have Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. Their goal? To create this perfect agrarian communist society. And to do that, they decided they had to literally wipe the slate clean of any Western or modern influence. They forced everyone out of the cities into these brutal labor camps and systematically killed anyone with an education, doctors, teachers, even people who wore glasses. And in the process of trying to build this twisted utopia, they killed around 2 million of their own people. That's almost a quarter of the entire country's population at the time. Just let that sink in. Our next example is just terrifying for how fast it all happened. It shows how ethnic hatred that's been simmering for years can just explode into unimaginable violence in the blink of an eye. So here's the backstory. Years before, Belgian colonial rulers had favored the Tutsi minority, and that created this deep resentment from the Hutu majority. Fast forward to 1994, the Hutu president's plane gets shot down,
And Hutu extremists used that as the spark they needed. They launched a pre-planned extermination campaign against the Tutsis, using radio stations to spread hate and machetes as their main weapon.
And the speed, it's just mind-bogglingly horrible. In just 100 days, about 3 months, an estimated 800,000 Rwandans were slaughtered. It was one of the fastest, most intense genocides of the entire century.
Okay, our last case study is different. It wasn't war in the classic sense or a slaughter based on ethnicity. This was a man-made famine, used as a weapon. Here's what happened. Stalin and the Soviet Union wanted to force all farms into collective ownership. But the Ukrainian peasants, they resisted. So the state's response? They just took all their food. They sealed the borders so no one could escape and no food could get in. Starvation wasn't an accident. It was the policy. And the result was the Holodomor, which literally means death by hunger. A famine that killed an estimated 8.5 million people, mostly in Ukraine. It's just a horrifying example of how a government can weaponize food and policy against its own people. So, after looking at these 5 just gut-wrenching examples, what's the point? The most important thing we can do now is try to connect the dots and see the patterns that link all of these tragedies together. And unfortunately, the patterns are really, really clear. Big conflicts create an environment where life just feels cheaper. New technologies, whether they're gas chambers or something as simple as a radio, get turned into tools for killing on a massive scale. And at the root of it all, you always find these toxic ideologies that paint other people as less than human, paving the way for violence. So I want to leave you with a question to think about. We've seen these patterns over and over again, the context of war, the tools of technology, and the justification of ideology. What does understanding how these tragedies were built tell us about how we can recognize the warning signs and stop them from ever happening again? It's a question we absolutely have to keep asking.